Every few years, the price of the laptop in your bag quietly jumps. Not because it suddenly got twice as good, but because the company that made it decided you would pay more. And it was right. You grumbled, you clicked buy. And in that tiny moment, you walked through a toll booth you never agreed to build. Economists have a boring name for this superpower: pricing power. And in a normal market, it barely exists. Raise the price of your coffee by $1, and the shop across the street quietly eats your entire breakfast crowd. This is called price elasticity. Push the cost up, and customers snap away like a stretched rubber band. For almost every business on Earth, that rubber band is the law. So the whole game of business becomes a knife fight over pennies, where nobody dares raise a price without bleeding. But a tiny handful of companies have found a way to cut the rubber band entirely. For them, the customer can't snap away, because leaving costs more than staying, and nobody has built that trap more beautifully than Apple. Here's the part most people miss. Apple doesn't really sell you a phone, it sells you a doorway into a house where all of your other things already live. Your photos sync to your laptop. Your messages follow you onto your watch. Your passwords, your notes, your music. The half-finished text you started on one screen and finished on another. All of it lives inside a soft, invisible web they call the ecosystem. Each thread feels weightless on its own, but woven together they become a rope. The day you finally think about switching to a cheaper phone, you don't compare two price tags. You imagine re-downloading your entire life, dragging thousands of photos across, losing the blue bubbles, rebuilding a decade of muscle memory, and quietly, before you've even finished the thought, you decide it just isn't worth it. That decision, made by hundreds of millions of people every single day, is the real product. Economists call it a switching cost. Apple calls it Tuesday. And it means that when Apple raises a price, you don't walk away. You can't, not easily. The rubber band has quietly hardened into a chain. For years, this was an invisible advantage, humming quietly in the background. Then, in the middle of the decade, the world handed Apple a brutal test. And it passed with almost frightening ease. It began far from any iPhone, inside the roaring construction of artificial intelligence. Every new AI data center is a starving giant, and its favorite food is memory chips, the very same high-performance memory and storage that goes inside your laptop. Overnight, the AI world started buying these chips by the mountain range, and suddenly there weren't enough left for everyone else. When demand explodes and supply can't chase it, prices don't rise politely. They detonate. The raw cost of the memory and storage inside a computer rocketed upward, and every device maker on the planet took the same punch to the gut at the very same moment. For most of them, this was a slow-motion catastrophe. Picture a company that builds generic laptops. It can't charge a cent more because a dozen rivals sell the same beige box at the same price. So when its costs leap, it has only two miserable options: swallow the loss and watch its profit evaporate, or raise prices and watch its customers sprint to the rival next door. Trapped in the open field, bleeding. Apple did the one thing a normal company simply cannot survive. It raised prices. Across the entire MacBook and iPad lineups by double digits, as much as 18 to 25%, passed straight down to you, almost overnight. In any other market, that is a death wish. Prices leap, demand collapses, buyers scatter to the horizon. It is the oldest rule in the whole book, and instead, almost nothing happened. Well, not quite nothing. People groaned. Corporate purchasing teams sighed and rewrote their budgets. And then, one by one, everyone simply paid. Demand barely even flinched. Apple took a global supply shock, a wave that had flattened its competitors, and calmly forwarded the entire bill to a customer base with absolutely nowhere else to go. That is what absolute pricing power actually looks like. Not a company that makes lovely gadgets, a company that has quietly turned its own users into a captive audience, and turned its ecosystem into a toll booth it can raise whenever it likes. A luxury tax the world just pays. Now, you might assume this is a magic trick only Apple can perform, the sweet reward for making things that people genuinely love. But there is a second company that proves the very same trap can be built out of something far colder than love. Its name is Nvidia, and its cage isn't woven from your photos, it's written in code. Nvidia sells the chips that train nearly every serious AI model on Earth. But the chips, it turns out, are not the moat. 20 years ago, its leaders made a bet that looked, at the time, faintly insane. They poured billions into building a software language, a way to actually talk to their chips, called CUDA, and then they gave the tools away, completely free to an entire generation of engineers and researchers. That generation grew up, and they built the whole modern world of artificial intelligence directly on top of CUDA. Every major model, every data center, every advanced tool. The code underneath simply assumes NVIDIA's chips are there, the way a city assumes there is solid ground beneath its streets. So now imagine you run a giant tech company, and a rival strolls up offering you a cheaper chip. Wonderful. Except your entire software world is written in a language that chip does not speak a word of. To switch, you would have to rewrite years of work, retrain all of your people, and gamble billions on it actually working. Most companies stare over that cliff and quietly step back. Remember the toll booth? Nvidia did something even bolder than Apple. It didn't just build a faster car, it poured the road that every other car has to drive on. And then set a booth right at the on-ramp. Its rivals can engineer a better engine all they like. They still have to merge onto Nvidia's road, and they still have to pay. And the toll is staggering. On many of its chips, Nvidia keeps more than 55 cents of every single dollar as pure profit. A margin almost unheard of for any company that makes real physical hardware. Its customers shoulder all of the risk and all of the cost of ever trying to leave. Nvidia simply stands at the booth and collects. Two wildly different companies. One built its trap out of the things you love, the other out of the things you can't function without. But squint, and it's the same machine humming underneath. Both own something genuinely rare, not merely a good product, but the ground their customers are standing on. Investors have a single word for this. They call it a moat, the structural thing that holds competitors and price wars at bay, the way a real moat holds armies back from a castle. Most companies simply don't have one. They fight out in the open field, bleeding over pennies at the mercy of every rising cost. But a true moat means you can be handed a global supply shock, an inflation wave, a swarm of hungry new rivals, and just pass the bill along year after year while everyone around you drowns. That is the entire difference between a business that is merely popular and a business that is genuinely unbreakable. Popularity is only a moment. A moat is a machine. And here's the strange, almost freeing thing about seeing the world this way. The headlines are nearly always screaming about the wrong thing. This quarter's panic, this month's shortage, this week's terrifying number. That noise arrives and it leaves, but underneath it quietly, a small handful of companies just keep raising the toll, decade after decade, no matter what the news happens to say. Those are the businesses that compound, the ones that turn plain patience into fortunes. Not because they got lucky, but because they own a road nobody can afford to leave. And the whole art is learning to spot the toll booths before the rest of the crowd does. To look past the noise and ask one deceptively simple question about any company. If the entire world got more expensive tomorrow, could this business just forward the bill? Almost none of them can. The precious few that can are the rarest, most valuable machines in all of capitalism. You walk through a dozen invisible toll booths every single day, and once you learn to actually see them, you can never quite unsee them again. And you might just start wondering which of them are worth owning. This video is sponsored by Moat. Everything we just covered, pricing power, toll roads, compounding quality at a fair price, is simple in theory. Actually finding those companies, that's the hard part. That's exactly what Moat is built for. It rates thousands of stocks on the two things that matter most: how strong the moat is and how much you'd pay for it. Quality times valuation on one simple scorecard. so you can spot the widening moats that are actually trading at a fair price. Check out MoatScope at the link below and go find your next compounder.